Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, Our Blessed and Beautiful Life. I'm Tina and I am inviting you into my kitchen today because I want to share a fun, simple recipe with you, and that is how to make homemade sauerkraut. And when I say simple recipe, I mean simple recipe. There's only a couple of ingredients that you need for homemade sauerkraut, and that's what makes it so much fun. You don't need much at all. So I don't know, have you guys ever eaten sauerkraut? I remember eating sauerkraut when I was a kid, but it was always, you know, the jarred sauerkraut from the grocery store, and we would eat it on hot dogs. And I loved it because I've said before in other videos, I am a salty, vinegary kind of person. I love that kind of stuff. So I remember as a kid eating sauerkraut. Let me tell you though, the first time I ever made homemade sauerkraut, I was like, oh my goodness. The difference between store-bought sauerkraut and homemade sauerkraut, it's crazy. It's like night and day. And the other thing, sauerkraut is really good for you. So if you look into fermented foods, the benefits that they have for your gut. So we get that here in the form of sauerkraut, and I also do water kefir, homemade raw milk yogurt. All of these things have amazing probiotics, healthy bacteria that are good for your gut. So it's, you know, it's a great way to fill your body with that and not have to take supplements to get those probiotics and those goodies inside of your system. The sauerkraut, it just so happens that I have found something that Lexi loves. She eats sauerkraut like it's going out of business. In fact, sometimes I get a little concerned and I'm like, you should probably slow down on that. She will just eat it just as a meal all by itself. It is that good. So I am super proud that I found something that I make that's fermented that Lexi loves. So we are, I say we, and it's really me and Lexi. Joe does eat sauerkraut, but not as much as her and I. So we are on our last jar of sauerkraut, and you guys, I don't mess around. I don't mess around with little quart jars. We make a gallon size at a time because that's how much sauerkraut we eat, but it's so good. Let me give you a close-up, just so you can see what it looks like. This is, you know, I think I had this on the counter fermenting for 3 to 4 weeks. And we'll talk more about the time frame for fermenting later on in the video because it's really just specific to your taste and how tangy you like the sauerkraut to be. But we kind of start to panic when we get this low on sauerkraut. So today I'm actually gonna double my recipe, and I'm gonna make a whole bunch, and I'm gonna store it in the fridge out in the garage. All right, so this recipe, like I mentioned before, is super simple. I'm going to double this recipe. So today I'm gonna do 2 gallon jars, and this is what I'm going to be fermenting my sauerkraut in. And of course you can do half gallons, you can even do quart size jars of this, and I'll talk to you about those measurements and how you can kind of, you know, modify those to match whatever amount of sauerkraut you want to have. But today we're going to do 2 gallons, and I may actually have a little bit more than these 2 gallons just depending on how much cabbage I end up with after I cut it up, because your cabbage heads, they range in size, right? So if I have more, it's no problem. I'll just spill those over into like half gallon jars or quart size jars. So we'll just see how it goes. So you're gonna want your mason jars, and then you're gonna want 6 heads of cabbage, and then you want a good sea salt. I've got to find sea salt here. And that is it. What did I tell you? Super simple, right? So instead of having to make a separate brine, the cabbage and the salt together is going to make its own brine. The ratio for what you're going to need is about 1 tablespoon of salt per head of cabbage, give or take a little bit. And what I like to do when I'm doing a really big batch like this is I get a big stock pot. So you are gonna need somewhere to mix your cut up cabbage and your salt, because you're gonna massage it really good. So you're gonna need something that's big enough to really get your hands in there. So since I'm working with so much cabbage today, I grabbed my big hot water bath canner pot, and that's what I'm gonna be using. The other thing that's not ingredient related that you're gonna need is some weights to put in your jar after you've put everything in there to ferment. I got these on Amazon super cheap. They're just little 1 pound weights. They're glass weights that you set inside. And the purpose of these is to hold the cabbage down underneath that brine, because anything that's above the brine while it's fermenting at room temperature can get moldy and nasty, and you don't want that. So it's very important that you have a weight that's gonna weigh the cabbage down and keep it submerged under the brine. If you don't have weights, you can put rocks inside of a ziplock baggie. You can get creative with it. You just need to make sure that cabbage stays below the brine the whole time that it's fermenting. All right, so now we've got our ingredients laid out. The first step is we're gonna give our cabbage a quick rinse, and we're gonna peel off those outer layers, the ones that are kind of dingy and dinged up, but don't throw them away, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. All right, so I have all 6 of my cabbage heads rinsed, and I peeled the outer leaves off. So there's a couple different ways that you can shred your cabbage. I prefer to just thinly slice it with a knife, but you can also use your food processor if you have one. So we're going to core all of these cabbages, and I'm gonna show you guys how I slice them. So you just wanna take off the stem, and then you're going to slice around all 4 sides of the core. All right, you guys, that was a wrist workout cutting up 6 heads of cabbage. But we are finally done, and as you can see, I've got everything sliced nice and thin, just the way we like it. You'll notice that I put it into 3 bowls and not just threw it right into the stock pot. And that's because I just like to layer my tablespoons of salt throughout the cabbage. So what I have is 2 heads of cabbage in each one of these bowls. So I'm gonna add them to the stock pot, and then I'm gonna layer the salt in there. So let's get started. I am just going to dump these in this pot. So you're just gonna get it here in the pot, and then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sea salt, and then we're gonna add some more cabbage to that. So I like to layer it. So I'm gonna do 2 heads of cabbage, 2 tablespoons of salt, another 2 heads of cabbage, 2 tablespoons of salt, and I'm just gonna keep layering it like that until we have everything in the pot. And it doesn't really matter how you put this in there, because you're gonna be mixing all of this up really good with your hands. So you see how I'm layering that? And now I'm gonna dump in my last bowl. All right, you guys, so at this point, I'm gonna just toss this around a little bit in the salt. This is not where I do my heavy massaging, which we will do in a little while. What I like to do is just mix this salt around, cover up this pot, and let it set for 30 minutes to an hour. What the salt's gonna do, it's going to make the cabbage start to sweat and start to wilt and soften a little bit. So it kind of does some of the work for you. And then once we come back, we're going to massage the cabbage. All right, you guys, we're back. It's been an hour that our cabbage has been soaking in the salt. And what I'm gonna do now is massage the cabbage. And this is a really important step because like I said, this is how you're gonna get your brine. But all you're gonna do is use your clean hands and massage that cabbage really good, punch it down, squish it in your fingers, really mix it up with that salt. And then you're gonna notice as you do that, you're gonna start seeing that liquid. So let's get started. And as you guys can see, If you remember when we first put the cabbage in here, it was like up to here, right? And it's sunk down. So that's what I was saying. The salt does a lot of the work for you. You don't have to let it sit before you massage it. You can just go right into massaging, but I prefer to let it sit for a good, 30 minutes to an hour. Let that salt soak in, and it's gonna start wilting that cabbage. So don't be gentle. You need to really get in here. If you've got some pent up tension, this is a great way to get it out. And you're just gonna keep doing this until you've got a really good juicy brine. So if you look down in here, you'll see how much brine has already been made. Basically all this liquid that comes out of the cabbage. So look how far we've beat this down already, but we're gonna keep going because that's not gonna be enough. So you can squeeze it in your hands or you can punch it. Punching always seems to work better for me. All right, you guys, so we're almost done. I have massaged my cabbage down, and look at the difference there from when we started. This whole pot was full of cabbage, and now it's all the way down, and we've got a good amount of brine down there. Now, let me give you a little tip, okay? If you don't have enough brine, once you pack the jars to cover and submerge the cabbage completely, don't fret. You can make a simple salt brine by just doing 1 quart of water to a tablespoon of sea salt. Simple as that. Use warm water, that way it dissolves when you put the salt in there. Shake it up, and then you can use that brine to top off your sauerkraut. No worries. We'll see if I need to create some brine here in a little bit, but I might have enough. So all you're gonna do now is pack your jars. And what I like to do as I go is really smush down the cabbage. All right, so I think I'm actually only going to have enough sauerkraut in here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I'm only gonna have enough sauerkraut for probably a half-gallon jar. So this other gallon jar is probably gonna be too big. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab a half-gallon jar to finish packing, and I will be right back. So now that we've got those packed, all we're gonna do is fill these jars with our brine. And I am out of brine, like I was telling you guys. So what I'm gonna do is make some of that salt brine that I just told you guys about. Okay, so I have made some salt brine, and what I decided to do is just do a half-gallon. So I've got half-gallon of warm water and lukewarm water. You don't want it to be too hot because you're gonna be putting this on top of the cabbage, and then 2 tablespoons of sea salt. So we've made our own brine, and I'm gonna just finish filling up my jars. Okay, you guys, so what I like to do is keep this extra salt brine in the fridge, and I just mark it as salt brine so that I know what it is. It will last pretty much indefinitely in your fridge. As the cabbage ferments and starts turning into sauerkraut, you may notice that the liquid will go down a little bit. So it's really nice to have some extra brine on hand so that you can just keep an eye on it over the next few weeks and top off your jar if needed. Because like I said, you always want everything submerged under the brine. This is where our extra leaves come in handy that we saved earlier. So what you're gonna do is use these as a cover to put over the cabbage and shove it down underneath the salt brine. And what I normally do is cut off the hard stalk part. It just makes it easier to work with because then you can fold it and it's easy. So all you're gonna do is add your cabbage leaf to the top of your cabbage. And sometimes I even fold it. It makes it a little bit easier to work with. And all I'm gonna do is add my little weight. I've got a couple floaters here and I'm gonna take them out because they're gonna float up to the top and then they're gonna get moldy. So if you've got any of those floating around, just take them out of the jar. And then you're just gonna add your weight on top of your cabbage leaf. And that's gonna hold everything down underneath that brine really well, so you're not gonna have to worry about it while it's fermenting on your counter. All right, so you can see that everything is completely submerged under the brine. No worries if you have extra brine and it's gonna cause it to overflow when you put your weight in there, just spoon some of it out of there, no big deal. There we go, that's perfect. Push it down in there really good. All right, give your jars a nice little wipe. And what you're gonna do is set the lids on top of these jars loosely. Through the fermentation process, gases are gonna be released in the brine and it can cause it to just overflow and bust in some cases, depending on how warm you keep your house. So we're just putting on the lids to keep the bugs out. Now here's another tip. As these ferment, they could spill over a little bit onto your counter and you'll wake up the next day with sauerkraut juice all over your counter. So what I like to do is just grab like a Pyrex dish and set your jars inside that dish. So if there is any overflowing over the fermentation period, it's just gonna flow right into this Pyrex. You guys, sauerkraut is delicious by itself. As I said before, Lexi eats this like it's its own meal, or you can have it on your hot dogs, like I said, or a side dish. It is absolutely delicious. So if you've never tried sauerkraut, don't knock it till you try it, like my mama always said, and give it a shot. Do you hear that crunch? So good. All right, you guys, that is it for the sauerkraut video. You're gonna let your sauerkraut ferment on the counter for, you know, anywhere from 7 days to 4 weeks. So it just depends on your liking as far as like how tangy you like your sauerkraut to be. I find that a week of fermentation on the counter is not near enough time because me and Lexi really like the sauerkraut to be nice and tangy. So I leave it on the counter at room temperature for a good 3 to 4 weeks. Now, if it's summertime and it's extra hot in the house, then I might do it a little bit less because it's gonna ferment faster depending on the temperature in your house if it's warmer. So 3 to 4 weeks for these jars. And then as soon as they're done fermenting, all you're gonna do is take the cabbage leaves out and take the weights out and put the lids on them and just set them in the fridge and you're good to go. And they will continue to ferment in the fridge, but it slows the fermentation down. They kind of go dormant, like it goes into like hibernation. That's probably not the right term, but you know what I mean. So thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me today. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. That tells YouTube that you like this video. And if you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe button. I'd love for you to stick around. All right, you guys, we'll see you next time. Take care. Happy fermenting. but you can also use your fruit. Can you stop looking at me? Oh my gosh.
What'd you say? Huh? You said my cooking wasn't good? I didn't think that's what you said.
Lexi, be nice to your brother. One day, you guys, that's all you're gonna have is each other. And now I'm gonna add my 1 pound weight. And you don't even have to use a funnel if you don't want to.